So, welcome back to 3rd Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and weirdly actually to a map that doesn't seem familiar to me. I have no memory of this map, which is somewhat peculiar because it actually looks like a rather fun one to play, and it must have been in the game for a little while at this point, maybe as part of the map packs that were released, I'm not sure. Anyways, it does have a little bit, it is a little bit reminiscent, I would say, of the Old Forest Road, at least in terms of the settlement over here. In fact, I think it may have been used as an initial template, the settlement itself, and it was lifted out of that map and put into one that was maybe a little bit more open and had an extra layer on the outside, so at least in terms of that style, we have seen something very, very similar to this one before. This is going to be another 5v3, not an entirely lore-friendly one either, but just the fact that this is a map that I have never really showcased before is more than enough reason for me to bump this one to the front of the queue. We are on the previous version of the game, as this isn't the test build of the new patch or anything, so all of the old mechanics do apply to this one. This one is a 3v5. Now, I can't quite recall the name of this map. It was said in the message on Discord of the player who sent this one to me, but it has completely slipped my mind, but I'm sure that you will already know that because I will be using it for the title of this battle replay anyway. We'll be going through the attackers first and foremost. It is a rather open settlement, this. I mean, it's got some snaking routes and then it's got a final stand up there, but it's fairly exposed, so attacking archers, unlike the Cardland outpost which we saw very recently, could very well prove to be the play here for the attackers if that's how they want to go about things. I think we've got really mostly good factions on the field today as well. There's a couple of evil factions, but no orcs are going to be gracing the field on this particular occasion. We'll start off with DF Mark, who's playing as Erebor. There are two dwarven factions, one of which on the attack, one of which on the defence, so Erebor taking up the mantle for the attackers. They've got some dwarven miners over here, which can be used as more of a throwaway unit, as can the mercenary guildsmen, really. Unlike the rest of the army, the mercenary guildsmen do suffer a little bit with their morale. The rest of the dwarves are a little bit more stout of heart than mere men who fight for gold. Ironfoot spears will be useful as well. Obviously in a 5v3 you have to compromise on quality somehow, so the dwarves will be more reliant on their mainline units rather than their bodyguards, but the dwarven mainline units, whether it's Ironfoot warriors or Ironfoot spears, are very, very dependable because of their high armour and high defensive values. It's going to be difficult for the defenders to get rid of them quickly outside of using some really high-end skirmishes perhaps, or some really good armour piercing. Ironfoot axe throwers, exactly the sort of thing which can be really useful on the defence. They can start a real phalanx buster of a unit or axe throwers, and obviously the dwarven ones are a little bit more resilient to any counter-fire that may be coming their way. Some Ironfoot warriors as well, plenty of them, good for the reasons I've already mentioned, more spears. Erebor legionaries are the upper end unit. Now we're going to be seeing a little bit less of the higher end Erebor units than we will from Khazad on the other side, I'm sure, but just a little bit of quality sprinkled here and there will be enough for them to stand up to some of the scarier units the defenders have on an individual basis as well. Axeguard of Erebor will be very useful against two of the factions on the defence, not so much the Elven faction that's on the defence, but more on that later. Crossbows, if they can get into a really good position, they could be absolutely devastating, the sort of thing which the defenders will really struggle to recover from. We'll have to wait and see if they can be used effectively. And then two bodyguard units, unlike the standard 4, which many dwarven players try to bring, even when it cripples the rest of their army financially. The Obsidian Guard are a really high melee defense and armor unit, very difficult to kill in melee quickly for any unit really, and that will be the case here as well. The Dragon Slayers are a little bit more aggressive with their armor piercing. They are shielded at the very least, so they won't be quite so vulnerable to arrows, but still, plenty of destruction can be wrought by these dwarven units. Now, moving on to the second army, we have Dunland, played by Froggy, a much more numbers-focused army just by default. We saw them in the last battle as well. A couple of units of Half-Orc Spearguard and Baneguard filling out the army. Spears of Orthanc are the unit of high-quality infantry/crossbows that Dunland have access to, so plenty of crossbow action coming from the attackers today, and none of the defenders have got access to crossbows either, so they will be a little bit worried about that, or they should be. Dunlending Clansmen. Unit of Riders of Orthanc. Going into the red limit on the Spears of Orthanc isn't necessarily the worst thing to do, as long as your numbers focused approach isn't compromised too much. We'll have to wait and see, because most of these units are hidden Wathlo trackers, Trollshore axe throwers and the like, so maybe a little bit more of a ranged focused approach from Dunland, but they have enough ranged units to be useful in that regard. Now then, the Elven faction, which is heading up the attack as Mirkwood heads up the defence, is going to be Imladrs. Now, Imladrs, of course, have got that extra armour in comparison to the other elves, which will stand them in pretty good stead on the attack, but they are a smaller faction by nature. Unlike Dunland, who have to go numbers heavy, Imladrs, for the most part, kind of have to go quality heavy. Not that there's anything wrong with that, given the high quality that Imladrs can field. Eldarin Way archers going to be very, very difficult to deal with, both at range and in melee for the defenders. Noratuno warriors have got that extra melee prowess, but I'm not sure whether they'll get the chance to use that if counter-skirmishing is involved on the part of the defenders. Gwythi Myrdain have got that armor piercing, which is going to be devastating to the dwarves and the Dalians that are on the defence. Broin and River Wars will be a little bit better against the Mirkwood defenders. Armour upgraded Imladris Guardian, so you can already see the level of units that Imladris are bringing. They don't really have the option to go into a more mid-tier approach like Erebor. We've already seen them go into a lot of their Ironfoot units. Imladris can't really do that. They can with these units of Swords of Rivendell and Spears of Rivendell over here, but it changes the entire complexion of their army from really high quality, more heavily armoured elves to something which is a little bit more akin to their elven brethren from other parts of the continent. And I don't know whether most of the time that's worth doing as Imladris, especially not when you're fighting alongside the likes of Dunland, who can handle the numbers just fine. Eldarin Way Swordmasters and some Imladris sentries as well, so late game pikes can always be a potential banana skin for both sides to have to deal with. Hertu Mihai, who is playing as the Hobbits. The battling Brandybucks are visible, which is kind of interesting, and the Proudfoot Protectors are very close to the settlement already, and also the Ents, but as with any time that we see the Hobbits on the field, I can't really go extensively into their army composition because much of their army is hidden right from the start. You know, there's probably going to be some farmers of Buckland, indeed there is, there's some long bottom mobs, they're throwing projectiles, crossbows, Tookish hunters for more archers, very numbers heavy again, very awkward faction to have to deal with the Hobbits, to be honest, so we'll see if the defenders are up to the challenge. And last but by no means least, we have Dominion R, who's playing as Rhudaur. He's got some Witch Realm enslavers over here. We said in the last battle on the Cardinal Outpost, Rhudaur can be invaluable to an attacking force because their throwing projectiles are so useful, the rate at which they can deal damage is so high, a really good burst damage on them, that the defenders should be very worried about facing off against a faction like them. Granadine Rangers also could be really useful for the attacks as well, given the more open nature of this hill settlement. Had some more Stroll Hunters, plenty of pikes as well, so many of the attacking factions have decided to invest reasonably heavily into their pikes. Dunland Pikemen and Granadine Pikemen there. We've got the Rhudaur Swordsmen in high numbers and Dunland Spearmen as well, so yeah, reasonably high numbers as well from Rhudaur. Again, you'd kind of expect that between them and Dunland, the Hillmen, and then the quality of the other three they've got, and the Hobbits obviously with more numbers. And then the Dwarves and the Elves can handle the high quality stuff. So well-balanced attacking force. What about the defenders? We shall start off with Bacon Soup playing as Dale. It seems like he plays as Dale in most replays we see him in, which is good. Got some Dalian Bowmen with the armour upgrade. I mean, Dale going to be really good at skirmishing with any pesky lower-end archers. They're going to be more well-suited for dealing with such things than Khazad and Mirkwood. Certainly Mirkwood will be wanting to use their skirmishers on things that are not other heavy archers. Dale will be a little bit less picky, especially with armour upgraded Bardian Marksman. Pretty much their entire MO is winning skirmish fights like that. Dismounted Earls of Dale are here, I'd imagine. Yes, indeed, there are Barding Herd in the distance and Swordmasters of Esgaroth, the triumvirate of upper-end Dalian units, which cover for one another's weaknesses quite nicely. Athala Rangers going to be important for the defenders, as Rangers in the current version of the game always are going to be, but those days are ever more numbered. Dalian Paladins, Blackshot Dragon Slayers for some armour piercing in melee and at range. Keldon River Patrol with more armour piercing at range. A second unit of Athala Rangers. This is a lot of ranged units, maybe not quite as much infantry as might be necessary, but if Khazad are handling most of the infantry heavy lifting and Mirkwood can chip in as well, it may not be the worst thing in the world, and Dale are more well equipped after all for going for this skirmish heavy approach and trying to mulch through enemy attacking skirmishers as well, maybe more so than the others, as we've already said. A catapult as well can be a real game changer, depending on how and where it's used. Then we have Ingamar, who is playing as Mirkwood, obviously ever the fan favourites that they are. Some upgraded Hiri Lung, so Mirkwood will be able to dip into their high quality units more easily than their opposite numbers in Imladris will be able to do today. Armour upgraded Hiri Outh as well, armour upgraded Hiri X, so all of the heavier units here, which will make for a very good front line for Mirkwood. Spears of Emenduia, we also have some Hiri Peng armour upgraded, so they will actually be able to skirmish quite nicely with the enemy, but they'll be hoping to go after something a little bit higher profile than that. Elders of the Elven King have got their Silverthorn arrows, as well as being very strong in melee. The Ents, which I'm sure we'll see the Ents from the Hobbits as well. More Hiri Peng and the Elven King's Palace Guard, a fantastic unit of glaive infantry. Very multifaceted, armour piercing, anti-cavalry, the works really. The only thing they lack, I suppose, is a shield, but again, a shield would take away from their shock infantry nature. And there will be other hidden units, probably Greenwood Rangers, probably some Woodland Realm Patrol and the like. But we will move on to the final army after that, glancing at that unit of Hiri Lang. We have Proxima Centauri, who's playing as the Dwarves of Khazad, who when they're on the defence, obviously very much at home. They can really invest heavily into their heavy infantry. Mithril Guard are here, as are the armour-piercing guards of Khazad, so Mithril Guard with their 3rd hit point, of course, and then the slightly more affordable, but no less effective Legion Bodyguard. You can also see the terrifying Iron Watch of Miramir in there. Khazad may not have access to a unit of Rangers, but the Iron Watch, they can be just as devastating as a unit like the Witchers. They may not do damage as quickly as the Witchers, but there is a certain inevitability about a blob forming in a battle like this, and the Iron Watch will be there to reap a bloody harvest. Mercenary crossbows on horseback, they will struggle, I think, given the presence of the Dunland riders. Hammers of Gundabad with their locked morale and their armour piercing. Orc hunters are in here as well. Sons of the Fallen with their spears standing out also, so they do have a range presence. And there's a few Legion units, including the mighty 1st Legion pikes with their armour piercing as well. Not a huge amount of pikes for the defenders. I mean, only one unit, so that could prove to be fairly decisive in the long run. Mirkwood, of course, don't have access to pikes, and Dale's pikes, if they choose to bring them, are very low tier, and Bacon Super's decided not to today. I don't know whether there's going to be a little bit of a cut. Well, there will be a cut, but I don't know how extensive that's going to be. The Hobbits may wish to try and establish a bit of a beachhead over here quickly. I mean, one thing that's worth saying about this settlement is the final stand. In order to retreat to it, you need to hold on to this front choke point for the longest amount of time. Otherwise, you could end up getting cut off behind the retreat to your final stand, which would certainly not do. So the defenders are going to have to be quite careful about that when they are planning out how and when they're going to fall back, because there is a certain inevitability about that, I would suggest. Anyway, I'll make a cut, and we'll rejoin when there is a clash on the field. So we are getting underway now with the Woodland Realm Patrol of Ingmar up here on the hill, starting to fire down into the positions of Dunland. Now, interestingly enough, Dunland probably the faction that will mind taking losses at the hands of Elven arrows the least of all the attackers today. I am glad to see, however, that the attackers are going to be trying to hit every choke point all at once. Dunland have probably got one of the most unappealing routes up the hill, but then Dunland also make one of the better factions when it comes to cannon fodder. Erebor appear to be going up from the rear, which is a little bit more open, but that could also be of great benefit to their own crossbows and the like. Moving a little bit further over here, you can see it's going to be Rhudaur taking the lead over here. Again, a little bit more open, but potentially going to be a little bit more support coming from up on high from those Dalian archers as well. And of course, Rhudaur not going to do quite so well under the kind of ranged pressure that Dale can put them under, albeit the armour piercing will still be pretty useful against them. And then from the front, this is where two attacking armies are going to be making landfall, and that's going to be the Shire and Imladrs, two very different factions in terms of how they're set up. But they can somewhat cover for one another's weaknesses, I suspect. The Orc hunters of Khazad going to be returning fire here, but plenty of these archers. And again, the Hobbits can bring archers and skirmishers in such high numbers that it's going to be fairly unlikely, I think, that their dwarves are going to be able to out-skirmish them throughout the entirety of the battle, especially with a bit of elven support as well. The Banderas archers themselves are actually not terrible at dealing damage either. Turkish hunters a little bit more about that numbers-focused approach. Singular unit of hobbitry and arms moving up the hill. I mean, this is where the dwarves will be very good in this situation. Imladrs have got the quality to go toe-to-toe with them, and the hobbits have got the armour piercing, but when it comes to standing stock still in a defensive position, Khazad are probably the most well-equipped faction in the game for doing that. So as long as they don't fall prey to any sort of tomfoolery from the hobbits and their crossbows and throwing projectiles, all should be well. Again are going to be firing, trying to get a better angle so they can shoot through multiple units and not have to shoot over their own defensive terrain. I don't really know how important these Dunland units are, but trying to put a dent in the attacking manpower before the battle truly gets into high gear isn't the worst idea. Guardian Marksman. I don't believe the dwarves can just go straight up here. If they can, then that's a little bit of an oversight. I mean, this isn't the biggest incline I've seen. I think maybe the attacking infantry could actually get up onto this position. I mean, for Dale's sake, you'd hope not, because it's actually a very nice bit of crossfire that they can engage in here. Even the heavier archers, which are more about their defensive prowess than their offensive ones, against that dwarven armour, will still be pretty good if you can hit them from both sides at once. Dominion are still slowly making its way forward again. Lots of reinforcements really far out into the open field, perhaps in an effort to keep them out of range of the Dalian archers that wait for them. But if the initial assault goes poorly, the reinforcements are going to be too far away to get into place. The hobbits actually are going to collide with the line now as well, charging in. A combination of 4th and 3rd Legion. They don't have the armour upgrade, but then that isn't necessarily necessary against the kind of hobbit forces they're facing off against. Two diminutive races, but certainly the hobbits a little bit more so. The dwarves made of much sterner stuff, especially encased as they are in their armour. Swords of Rivendell moving forward to offer a little bit of support. They will be able to go toe-to-toe with the dwarves a little bit more so, but even then the Legion units are going to be superior to the basic Rivendell ones. Orcons of Khazad continuing to trade back and forth with the archers in behind. This is a good thing for the attackers, because all the Orcons have really been doing is trading blows with ranged units, now having to go after Longbottom Mob as well with both their units of archers, try and take away their ability to deal damage quickly in an effort to try and support the front line here. Longbottom Mob will do damage slowly, but they've got a lot of ammunition, so if you leave them be, the kills they can rack up are pretty significant. And the dwarves are actually starting to struggle a little bit here. The combination has proven to be a little bit more potent than I was expecting it to be honest. The basic hobbits combined with the basic Imladrs forces so far have actually put the dwarves to task a little bit. Maybe a little bit more support is required. Well, we continue our rounds around the settlement. Dunland slowly creeping forward, but so far in no great rush to charge up the hill. I think they realise that if they do so, they will be put under pressure by elven archers pretty quickly. Although the elves have changed their position a little bit to go after the dwarves, going after the slightly exposed dwarven miners, but of all of the dwarven units they could target, they are by far the least impressive. Even the dwarves have got units that are really far back, their most important ones as well, to keep them out of range of skirmishers, but even still. Rhudaur are actually being afforded a lot more room over here, so they have 2 roads that they can travel down. This is a bit of a conundrum though. Do they have the manpower to attack both of those at once? If they get the timing right, and they do so, that's more thinly that the defenders will have to spread themselves. Dunland hunters firing into the defenders. Barding herd are completely exposed as well. I mean, they are heavily armed and they do have a slight shield value, but this isn't ideal. You don't want to be losing Barding herd for no good reason. One of the better defensive tools that you have at your disposal. Dunland still creeping their way forwards. Some Ents that, probably the Hobbit Ents, and indeed they were going to move forward, I think, to try and help smash that front line apart. But maybe the encroaching Hammers of Gundabad convinced them otherwise. Hammers of Gundabad will be very good at dealing with Ents, but as soon as the Hammers of Gundabad move back, the Ents are going to be quicker to take advantage of their absence on the front line, but in come the Hammers once again. Hobbits moving back. I mean, they're kind of retreating from this fight, the attackers, but they have done a decent amount of damage, at least to the first front line that the dwarves laid on, but the Hammers are a scary enough unit, and now there's another unit of Legion as well to help shore things up with a shielded unit on the front line. The Ents probably need to get out here before those dwarven axes and hammers can find purchase on their bark. Moving forward, so the attackers keen on keeping this assault going. Looks like both units of Orcons of Khazad are out of ammunition. so going to be utilised as makeshift infantry as well, which is fine. They'll do just fine as infantry in the same way the Norotino warriors will as a result of their dual wielding. Dalian bowmen up here on the hill, lingering with intent. Bardian marksmen taking damage here. I mean, Dale are very eager on not taking the bait and firing back into the Rhudaur archers. I mean, this does mean they're not wasting their ammunition, I suppose, on a unit they really would rather not be skirmishing with, but arguably something worse is happening here, and it's that they're allowing the attackers to get really good value off with a unit as lowly as the Dunland hunters. So not ideal. And Rhudaur's true strength in terms of their skirmishers has yet to be utilised. Stuff like Troll Shore Axlers and Etenwall's Troll Hunters will surely be the main problem. Bandits moving forward. Here come the Ents, so charging downhill, and I have to say actually the Ents are going to be, I think there's only one of them left down here, but the Ents would actually be pretty good against all of these units. They're all spears. The Ents count as infantry, so the spear malus will be in effect. Going after these bandits as well, punting them one by one. Greenwood Watchers are also here, getting into position to use their throwing daggers, I suspect. They need to do so quickly because those Gwathlo trackers are firing into them, and against especially some of these slightly more fragile elven units, we've already seen the Dunland hunters use good effect on the other side. The last thing the defenders need is for the Gwathlo trackers to be afforded the same courtesy. Dwarves beginning their assault in earnest down here. Dale still just waiting, biding their time for now. The Earls and the Barding herd together. Very strong pairing that Dale have available to them. And the Ironfoots, as we said at the start, are very good as basic dwarven infantry, but they're going to need something a little bit more if they hope to really force Dale onto the back foot here. The tragedy of Dale and Erebor facing off against one another in battle. There's javelins available as well, Mirkwood waiting. The problem is for the dwarves, I think they will probably realise at this point that if they do send forward more, they're just going to meet the full fury of all of these skirmishers, and that, even for them, is going to be pretty nasty. Rhudaur are now engaging in melee. Dismounted Earls against Rhudaur swordsmen as far as swordsmen go. The Earls definitely have the edge here, especially with a little bit of range support coming from on high. This should be enough to deal with this token effort of an assault really from Rhudaur fairly quickly. Fallow Rangers somewhat exposed actually. They need to be quite careful. If Rhudaur are paying attention, that would be first port of call in terms of a unit you'd want to go after. The Dwarves continuing to come under by far the most pressure of all the defenders thus far. The Ents trying to barrel through the lines with the long bottom mob. Norotino warriors actually able to get up into a position where the Dwarves were previously, but this is exposing them to another unit of Orc Hunters of Khazad back in the final stand. And as I mentioned in the army composition phase, the defenders need to hold on to this frontal choke point, which is why I think it's good the attacks have elected for their two army assaults to be at the front, because if this position was to fall, they cannot retreat up to the hill anymore, and all of a sudden elements of the army are going to be cut off from one another, and from there you'd be extremely surprised if the defenders went on to win. So unsurprising to see this is the case, but mercenary crossbowmen now in position. Khazad do not have the Ironfoots that their dwarven brethren do. This is the only crossbow they have, but this will do just fine in this situation. And you can see actually how quickly a combination of the crossbows and the hammers of Gundabad are actually forcing this attack onto the back foot. Reinforcements are not going to arrive quickly enough, and that is a chain rout. So the dwarves have weathered the storm quite adeptly there. Khazad will be most happy with how that has gone. While the Dalian firing lines starting to come into effect more and more now that Rhudaur are starting to press forward. Still not a full committal just yet. I mean, adding a unit of Dunland hunters to keep the assault going is hardly what you would consider a major play, but keep an eye on that as things continue. I think Dunland are now engaged in melee as well, at least partially. Gwathlo trackers getting stomped on by what remains of the Ents. This unit of Spears of Emondui are moving forward and dealing with the other Gwathlo trackers, so the Dunland assault in danger of collapse. Pang on the hill as well. Actually, are they, based on the position here, I'd be very surprised if they weren't wasting a lot of their ammunition into the dirt. We'll never know now because they've used all their ammunition, so they pulled out their swords. Useful enough later on. Still biding their time and waiting with these units, Daily and Bowman. Looks like the archers at the very least are going to be shooting into the backs of these units now. This is where Dale really need to earn their keep because they've invested so much in their ranged units that they're not going to be able to contribute to the infantry fighting as much as their allies today. Mercenary guildsmen surely are not going to last too long under this sort of pressure. The armour piercing is going to be good against the Dalian units they're facing off against, but I think their morale is going to collapse faster than all that if these arrows continue to flow. Mercenary guildsmen already shaken. Just a volley or two from the river patrol will probably be enough to bring things back into control for Dale. Still these Rhudaur marksmen, I mean, plenty of these low-end archers that Rhudaur have brought. I mean, the Rhudaur marksmen are always a good choice because of how much ammunition they have. Guardian marksmen now maybe being forced to return fire somewhat. Down over here. Defeat seems certain for the Dunland Hunters. This one unit of Earls has done very well for itself, but they haven't escaped completely unscathed. The sheer number of hillmen they've had to face off against has taken a little bit of a toll on them. But so far, no choke point has looked in imminent danger of falling. Imladrs Guardians and Spears of Rivendell now moving forward as well. There's a lot of hobbits on the front line, and perhaps this is why Proxima Centauri felt the need to bring the Sons of the Fallen into the battle. A very heavy unit of spears. Hobbits, I mean, differing fortunes based on the exact unit we're looking at here. Again, all of these units are armour-piercing, low tier but armour-piercing, so it could be a death by 1,000 cuts kind of situation here that the dwarves experience. Longbottom mob still in a good enough position. I mean, there's still maybe the opportunity for them to slip around the dwarven front line. I mean, there is another unit of Sons of the Fallen there, should that transpire, but you can see the Sons of the Fallen are actually pushing back against this as well. Spears of Erebor still doing very nicely as well, as perhaps you would expect. I mean, this isn't the best matchup for Dunland, you would have to say. Dunland tends to do better when they're not up against a faction which is so adept at carving their way through lighter forces. The Riders of Orthanc may be flying a little bit too close to the sun here. Ingemar has really squeezed as much potential as he can out of this singular unit of Erebor spears. I think they're about to come to the end now though, as the bandits shower them with javelins, but here Pang ready to get in position as well. Greenwood Rangers are in place now. They need to be very careful with this unit. This is such an important tool in the defender's arsenal in this version of the game. And protectors. This is interesting. So yes, they can go down here. Which, now that the dwarves know that, I mean, surely this means, yeah, Bardian Marksman being slain, Dalian Bowman easily being dealt with as well, so that crossfire was nice while it lasted. I'm surprised the dwarves didn't at least try and intercept them in melee, but it is what it is. Still got the Keldon River patrol up here. They've got their swords drawn now as well, though. This front line. Mercenary guilds are broken and fighting to the death, much like the Dalian forces facing off against Rhudaur. They're going to be victorious, but they're going to be very battered and bruised at the end of it all. Dunland spearmen now engaging down this road as well, but the Barding herd, who actually didn't take as many volleys as they could have done, which is rather fortunate for them, are going to be here to hold the line. Easy enough to hold back a single unit of the most basic Rhudaur spears. We're also starting to see stuff like Attenmore's Troll Hunters on the way forward. Thala Rangers trying to defang them as quickly as they are able. the last dregs of these forces over here from both sides continue to fight. And more reinforcements on their way across the open field from Rhudaur. The Rhudaur do need to be careful with two roads with which they need to travel down. Swordmaster of Esgaroth getting in the way of the Ironfoot Warriors. The Swordmasters should have the melee expertise to win that fight. It's not the most efficient fight to take, but it'll be enough to stop the dwarves for the time being. Plenty of these river patrols still up. Woodland Protectors. What are they going to be firing at then? Will that be a savage volley? Ironfoot Spears. Not the scariest unit in the world, but enough to do damage too. Then the Dunland assault has slightly slowed once more. That would represent a real problem for them. Meanwhile, I know what that is. Where are they? They must be nearby, surely. I mean, the dwarves are very keen on holding on to this position, again, for good reason. That is the Iron Watch of Mirrormere, surely. I cannot see them, however. But their effects are going to be all too obvious. I mean, the elves have also committed forward some pretty serious units. The Bruin and Riverwards and Imladrs Guardians finding a gap in and around the lines, but when you're talking about guards of Khazad and Mithril Guard, Imladrs are even going to struggle when it comes to dealing with such a conundrum, but they are going to be able to surround the position here. They've got Proudfoot Protectors going to be getting into melee as well with those pikes. The Imladrs Guardians, though, are going to have to try and deal with the crossbows first and foremost. Khazad Reclaimers also going to do a lot of damage. If they can flood through with a lot of infantry here, which it looks as though they're going to try and do. I mean, Tookish Hunter's not exactly the highest quality unit, but they're going to be able to make a nuisance of themselves, so this is, I think, probably the key moment in the battle now. If the dwarves can stabilise things, then this will prove to be a very costly endeavour for Imladrs and the Shire, but if they are unable to... Ooh, hello. The catapult firing in. That should be enough to rout a few of these units. Need to be careful though, because they could end up routing their own men as well. Bardian Marksman here, Athala Rangers firing at point blank. Again, all of these units very weak in nature, but they should be dealt with very quickly as a result. Dalian Royal Guard are celebrating. They're not even in melee and they're celebrating. Dunland Spearmen continuing to struggle against the wall of barding herd they're going up against, but again, it always felt like this was a little bit more of a token effort of an attack anyway. Marksman in the backfield there. The Swordmaster of Esgaroth continue. Some Ironfoot Spears joining them on the front line now, however, and now through sheer numbers, the Dalian Swordsmen are probably going to be outmatched. Continue to do their best though. Keldon River Patrol. You know things are a little bit desperate when the River Patrol are the unit that you're committing to the front line, because they really are very poor in melee, especially when it comes to dealing with dwarven units. You are not going to be doing all that well, but Ironfoot Warriors pushing forward against the Woodland Protectors. I mean, Erebor is starting to make some inroads here. There's something of an inevitability now about their victory over here, which means Mirkwood, I think, need to consider their priorities. I mean, Dunland are kind of doing the right thing by waiting, because either they can wait until Erebor are outright victorious and then they can begin their assault to surround Mirkwood here, or if Mirkwood do start siphoning off some support to try and stop Erebor's advance, they can then move forward and simply smash through a weakened Mirkwood position. So Froggy should just continue in the vein that he's been doing so now. I mean, already Mirkwood is starting to send support elsewhere, which is right. You can't afford to just stay comfortable in your lane. Mirkwood have only had one choke point all to themselves in this battle, whereas Khazad have had the most significant one and Dale have had two to deal with. Technically three if you consider they fell back to the road a little bit. Hirialth are going to carve their way through battling Brandybucks. Another unit of Ruin and Riverwards on the way forward. Still depleted mercenary crossmen continue to take pot shots as and where they can. The dwarves, however, now being swamped. The Gwaithir Myrdae following through with a host of elves and hobbits at their back. Mithril Guard may very well have met their match here. Really isn't all that much from the attackers left down here though. They've had to commit everything really to bring this defence down, and they will be able to do it just about, I think, but this is also going to mean a drastic rethink is required.
Without their general, they may lose heart and flee.
There goes the Hobbit General. Demolished by the Iron Watch of Mirrormere, who have actually routed off a significant portion there. And there are the Iron Watch. The frame rate really did not like the level of damage that was being inflicted there. I mean, this could be a real problem actually for the attackers. We're not going to get too close to that. We've already had enough mechanical problems with the game of late. Here we Peng firing away as well. So I mean, Imladrs and the Hobbits could actually fall by the wayside completely as a result of all that. Well, Mirkwood now engaging against the Dunland assault. Careful Baneguard moving up the hill, but Mirkwood have got the expertise here to be able to hold this force at bay for the time being without too many dramas. Still got plenty of reinforcements as well, but here's a problem. The dwarves really starting to push in. Mirkwood need to start diversifying their position a little bit. They can't afford to just loiter around there for the reasons I've already mentioned. Axguard of Erebor now in vanguard with what is left of the Ironfoots that have got the dwarves this far. Woodland Protectors are going to retreat. Ironfoot crossbows could be going after the Athala Rangers, but I mean they're just going after Barding Herd. Looks like the Rhudaur assaults have started to peter out a little bit, but that may be as a result of them simply having more ground to cover. And they're also focusing on this assault over here so they can maybe link up with Imladrs and the Hobbits after all of the progress they have made. Dunland Pikes actually will be providing an invaluable service in a fight against the Barding Herd, and with the Witch-Roman Slavers as well. Things are progressing as they would have hoped. That is a lot of dead Dalian bowmen there. By the looks of things, that probably came about as a result, yeah, Elder and my archers. High damage archers indeed, the Blackshot Dragon Slayers. We'll be using those Wind Lancers to good effect. I mean, if you have a look over here, with the carnage that has been wrought, the Iron Watch getting into melee having already done a lot of damage. I think Imladrs and the Hobbits are still going to be just about victorious over here, but it has come at such a cost. Here we Peng, and I think Elders of the Elven King were also firing in over here. The question is, have they spent too much of their efforts here? Because now they can go throughout the settlement, but I'm not sure they can actually surround Mirkwood effectively, at least not from this angle. Erebor may very well be able to do such though. But they may need the support of Rhudaur as well, so as much as momentum is kind of on the attacker's side, it's just whether or not they've got enough manpower to see themselves through the rest of the battle, I think. And I would call that into question for the moment. Going for crossbows, taking a few hits. Protectors. There's javelins. Javelin's always going to be a very useful tool against dwarves. Athala Rangers now getting into melee, the Barding Herd having to turn around, having already bloodied themselves in combat against Rhudaur. They're now having to also muck in against the Ironfoots of Erebor. Still got the most scary units at their disposal at the back, but even over here you can see that already we're starting to see evidence that the attackers have committed forward nearly everything. I think Dunland are the ones that have actually got the most left in reserve, surely. So we'll see if that's proven to be the right choice throughout the battle, based upon its outcome. Ironfoot Spear's defeat is a distinct possibility. The Dalian Paladins making their way over here, which they should. That armor piercing will be at its most effective against Erebor. Not the kind of unit that Erebor would have been hoping to see come at them. The hobbits and Imladrs are starting to make their way around here with a little bit more pace now. Only a unit of Hearing Pang stands in the way, and Imladrs will batter through them fairly quickly. What's going on here? Longbottom Mob and Ettenmoor's Shoal Hunters together, going to be dealing with this unit of Dalian Bowmen that's acting as the unit guarding the hill. Rangers are a unit that's far too dangerous to allow to maintain their position here, surely. Just a few volleys from the Paradigm Rangers into the Blackshot Dragon Slayers would be enough to more than pay for themselves at this point. You can afford to be far less stingy with your Rangers as the attackers, just getting one or two good positions for a few volleys is all it takes, whereas the defenders kind of need to utilise them perfectly throughout. Rhudaur Marksman now moving forward, a nice surrounding action between them and the Dwarves, which is finally going to deal with this pocket of Dalian resistance. This is going to allow Erebor to continue to move forward. A point-blank volley from the Keldon Rule Patrol is actually enough to rout those Ironfoot spears, so these are the margins by which the battle could swing. I mean, the Wardens of Amon Lank as well as the Dalian Paladins are both extremely good units against Erebor. The high amount of armour piercing they're able to do. Forward come the Obsidian Guard now with crossbows and Dragon Slayers, but there really should have been at least one bodyguard tier unit from Erebor on this front line from the beginning, rather than waiting until now. Still fighting going on over here as well. These little pathways that exist up on the walls here at the back of the settlements are kind of difficult to keep track of, but the Dwarves trying to take advantage of that, but in the end they stumbled upon the Elven King's Palace Guard, so a unit of Ironfoot Spears was never really going to be enough now, was it? More reinforcements for this front line over here. Hiriak, Heavy Spearman. At the very least it'll slow Imladrs' progress significantly. It may be enough for them to win this fight as well. Numbers are fairly even. The Hiriak are fresher certainly, but stuff like the Broinen River Wards and the Elder Enway that are in there are stronger when it comes to dealing damage, so we'll wait and see. Brandy Bucks, Dunland Pikemen, still Merc Crossbows as well. I mean, I think the problem the attackers have over here is they would ideally like to be launching an assault on the summit of the settlement, but they don't really have the manpower over here to be doing that. If they tried it now without the support of Erebor and Dunland, I think they would be met with failure, especially with a unit as strong as the 1st Legion Pikes here. They've still got bodyguard tier units. They don't have many units, but the units they do have are significant enough that they're going to need numbers if they want to be victorious there, and that's not really what they have, if we're being honest. 23 Gwythi Myrdain are good enough to have as a central unit, but again, more numbers required. And that is going to be incumbent on them being victorious over here, and actually, given Mirkwood's presence still in this part of the settlement, that's no given. I think Dunland kind of need to be the ones to pick up the pace at this point, because I don't think there's any way that the Dwarves can actually be outright victorious. I mean, if they are, it will be on the backs of their bodyguard tier units, as it often is. Still Mirkwood, I mean, there's not many of them remaining now. Combination of those half-orcs and the close proximity of the Spears of Orthanc surely is going to be enough to finish them off at this point. Greenwood Rangers in a good position to fire. Depends on what they're firing at, I suspect. I think they're actually going after the Snaga. I mean, surely the Spears of Orthanc are what you want to be going after, especially if you're going to put themselves right in their crosshairs. Turkish Hunters probably going to rout. Ah yeah, but the Palace Guard over here, Mirkwood, are definitely going to be able to defeat this little expeditionary force that Imladrs and the Hobbits sent around here to try and help put some pressure on Mirkwood in this part of the settlement. Further back. Balance of forces evenly matched? I don't know about that. It's such a chaotic fight at this point. I mean, surely the Rhudaur marks aren't going to get very far with Elders of the Elven King. They're trying to engage them in melee, perhaps, but even if they did, they would just be sliced apart very, very quickly. Dragon Slayers should be good at cutting their way through what very little remains of Dale over here, but to be fair, there's only 9 Dalian Paladins remaining anyway, so not exactly the most important thing. Still a few Imladrs units over here as well. Really just on clean-up duty at this point, the attackers. At least here. The position of Mirkwood, like I said, they are cut off Mirkwood, essentially, from the defence at the top, which is entirely Dale and Khazad. So that has come to pass, but I'm not sure whether it's the crippling blow that I feared it may have been. I still think Mirkwood at this point thought the game crashed for a second then. That's unfortunate though. It looks as though the general died as a result of like the initial charge, which is not what they want to be seeing. What were they retreating from? Well, it must have been the Trollshot X throwers. So they're not going to be able to get into as good a defensive position as they would have liked, with the Witchram Enslavers being dealt with by Reclaimers, 1st Legion Pikes and Black Shots. Dwarven General Falls, but like I said, I still think Mirkwood are probably going to end up being slain in this battle, but the damage they do may very well be enough to get this final stand up here to be victorious in the long run. We'll have to wait and see. 3 Athala Rangers remain. Still the sort of thing which can actually do a surprising amount of damage over a longer period of time. Khazad Reclaimers being engaged by out of ammunition Rangers. If they still have ammunition, then that would explain why they're trying to get away, but if the attackers are doing their due diligence, there's no way they should allow the Reclaimers to do their thing. But Royal Guard, if they're out of ammunition, getting into melee for them is a very desirable thing indeed. So the Franodine Pikemen may fancy their chances in this engagement. They're still fully healthy, so this is a very important unit for Rhudaur to have maintained throughout the battle. Trollshaws as well, Reforged and Javelins. This is Rhudaur revealing their hands to be a little stronger than it initially appeared. These throwing projectiles which they can save for the late game. So effective, but it's whether or not they actually have the melee capabilities to lay their enemies low. I mean, they're going to need to get a few more volleys off because the 1st Legion Pikes are going to charge in. Doing the right thing here though. They're trying to get units in the way. Yeah, they're going to have to leave. Witchram Enslavers. I mean, this is going to be fairly taxing, especially on the 1st Legion Pikes if they're being pulled around a battle like this. The Black Shots need to be moving in support of them on a constant basis, I would suggest. Franodine Pikemen are a little bit isolated now. Khazad and Reclaimers continuing to throw. What have we here? Defeat seems certain for the Hiri Lan, having to deal with Erebor bodyguard units. Hiri Peng doing their thing also. Hiriak holding the front line against the encroaching Dunlanders. 2 units of Spears of Orthanc is often the way. Going into the... I mean, the red limit for Dunland in terms of their higher end units may as well not exist on the 1st level, because everyone's going to go into the red limit to bring 2 units of Spears of Orthanc. There's no good reason not to. Black Walls are a unit that can hide anywhere, and yet we haven't seen them as of yet. Some hidden Snaga. Better than nothing, I suppose. Palace Guard and Elders of the Elven King are making their way over here.
Without their general, they may lose heart and flee.
And the Hiriak are on the way over as well, so Mirkwood have managed to slip the net somewhat against Erebor and Dunland, and they will be trying to help their allies deal with Rhudaur first and foremost, and then they can put on a united front against the aforementioned Erebor and Dunland. Further up the hill, 1st Legion Pikes victory seems certain. Dealing with what remains the Trollshaws. They do need to turn around, I think, and deal with these Franodines as well fairly quickly, because last thing they need to be doing is unnecessarily losing any Royal Guard models on the ends of these Northman pikes. They are now going to utilise their own pikemen. The first Legion, I mean, as good as the Franodine pikemen are, I would suggest the First Legion pikes are the best in the game, certainly in this version of it anyway. I'm not so sure about the upcoming patch, but the intricacies of that we will be speaking about at a later date. Customary claimers, maybe they're out of ammunition. There's only 19 of them left, but they're strong enough to still be a significant unit as the battle enters its most important phases. Blackshot Dragon Slayers charging in, finally going to try and... I mean, surely the Franodine pikemen are going to rout at this juncture. They will fight to the death. Now then, catapult crew moving back. I haven't really seen much of the catapult, to be honest. Victory belongs to the attackers over here, but with what are they going to be trying to take the rest of the settlement with? Trollshot, axe throwers, sniper skirmishers, so throwing projectiles Froggy still had in the back pocket. Spears of Orthanc as well as strong. There's still those Erebor bodyguard units in various states. I mean, it's not an insignificant force, this. Ferodrum Javelins coming back from Rhudaur as well, having been salvaged, but we will have to go up to times 6 speed while the attackers get back into position. The catapult was trying to be salvaged, but in the end it was swamped and overwhelmed. So the battle is kind of joined once again. You can see all of the attackers loitering nearby, but these few men of Rhudaur are not going to be enough to deal with these elven spears. And there's still these 3 Athala Rangers. I wonder how much, or how many, they've managed to kill. Need to be careful not to overextend themselves here, the defenders. Catapult crew is still alive, although I don't think they're going to be able to remount their artillery at this point. Forward comes some Half-Orc Spear Guard. I mean, they need to attack with their full force here, the attackers, if they want to yield good results. I mean, having a look here, the attackers are ahead by 2 percentage points. That's usually a sign that they're going to go on to win the battle overall, but the quality discrepancy is quite real here. Between the Dragon Slayers and the Spears of Orthanc, they still have some really high-end units, but the average quality of the defending army is substantially higher, especially when you consider there's still stuff like Snaga and Half-Orcs making up a decent portion of the attacking force still. Rangers able to shoot at point blank. Any extra kills they get at this point would be most appreciated, I'm sure. Don't really know what's going on here. Let's go to times 2 speed while the slow demise of the Hiriak at the hands of those javelins continues. Again, Snaga skirmishers have been allowed to get some good value. Dunland hunters earlier on in the battle, as we mentioned. Usually when you see stuff like that, and usually when the percentages are like this, it does all point to an attacker victory. Finally they're going to deal with those Athala Rangers. Probably about time. They got away with too much already, you would suggest. Quadrant Javelins. Close by, Spears of Orthanc. Do they still have ammunition? It looks like it. They've still got their crossbows out. If that is the case, things could get pretty messy for the defenders. There's not really much else I can say here. The defenders seem content to allow the Hiriak to do their thing. They are going to retreat behind the buildings to a certain extent. There's a lot of ammunition that the attackers are now using on a unit they could just overwhelm in melee. And so they do. Is this going to be a large-scale counter-attack? I don't know if that's necessarily the best idea, because they'll be in full view of the Spears of Orthanc. They need to make up their mind, whatever it is they're going to be doing, and it is going to be a full-blooded counter-attack here. Everyone needs to be involved, though. The dwarves can't afford to just allow their allies to take the damage for them. It needs to be all or nothing here, so that they can get through this situation quickly and try and silence that one unit of spears, and also the Reforged from javelins are a dangerous thing to behold at this stage in the battle as well. Defeat seems certain for the Imladrs Guardians. I mean, from a melee standpoint, other than the Dragon Slayers, which are pretty scary to be honest, that armour piercing is the sort of thing which will give most units pause. The Palace Guard and the Elves of the Elven King may be slightly better equipped to deal with the Dragon Slayers, but for the most part they may prove to be the ace in the pack for the attackers still. And that's still a lot of Snaga Javelins that are finding their marks here. And another unit of Troll Shores, yeah, I think there's too much range damage that the attackers are still capable of doing. And I think that may prove to be a terminal problem for the defenders. In come the Legion Bodyguard now as well. He seems certain for the Dragon Slayers still, which is somewhat surprising. I thought the armour piercing would have started to hit home a little bit more so. When it comes to getting into melee though, the Snaga skirmishes are really just going to be there as meat shields, but that could actually be a valuable service to provide at this point. Javelins. Still biding their time and waiting here. Maybe they think they don't have enough of a good angle. May as well go up to ×2 speed, I suppose. Given the nature of this fight, it's now very static. And it really just comes down to, do the defenders have enough strength to win if they make this a pure brawl, or do the defenders have the ammunition and the angle to be able to use that armour piercing and turn the battle around? There goes the Imladrs General. I'm surprised the Imladrs General is still alive actually. But Elrond falls at this point. They are making their way through the attackers at a rate of knots, and unsurprisingly the Snaga want no further part in that fight. Legion Bodyguard could start pushing their way through now, but now the crossbows surely have got the best angle they're likely to get. They may have squandered their opportunity though. Oof, that is a savage volley. Snaga and Troll Shores doing their thing. I don't know, the losses that they're incurring by doing this. I don't know if they have necessarily got the strength to stand up to this push in melee though. Legion Bodyguard is still very much alive. It's a very close battle this. Coming right down to the wire. Snaga skirmishers pushing their way uphill. These forces have made it to stop the Troll Shore axe throwers from throwing, but are there going to be enough of them to actually kill off the Troll Shores in melee now? I'm surprised none of them have gone for the Spears of Orthanc, but maybe they felt as though they don't actually have the ability to beat them in melee any longer. And Khazad and Reclaimers will try and take that duty upon themselves. Good crossfire there. Continuous routing for all of these units. Ironfoot crossbows trying to get a good vantage. I think it's going to come down to numbers here. I don't think they have enough left to actually kill the Spears of Warthank off. Maybe they do with the first Legion Pikes, I don't know. I think that might have been the Mirkwood General. Yeah, I think there's just a little bit too many of these lower tier throwing projectile units, and then basing it around that one unit of Spears of Warthank that remains. I think the defenders are going to come up just short on this one, but a very close one and very finely balanced as well. One decision from either side could have swung this battle the other way quite easily. Defeat seems certain. Only a military genius could win this battle. Outright victory there for the Spears of Warthank. Which means the last unit left alive is going to be the Blackshot Dragon Slayers of Dale. Stylistically, maybe, a little bit of a controversial unit, you would suggest.
We've captured the enemy's general.
And there goes King Bran.
The cowardly dog to turn tail and run.
And that is going to be that. 3% the difference, not all that much remains. Shows how big the attacking armies are, but then when factions like Dunland and the Hobbits are involved, you know that the army is going to be large. Spears of Warthank, the only, them and the Reforged and Javelins, 2 units of quality, but the rest of these units, Snarging, Trollshaws, very low end stuff. But yes, a very enjoyable battle to behold, that one. And like I said, I think the actual settlement itself is one that is very, very similar, if not the same, to the one that's on the Old Forest Road, but a different feeling to this map at the very least. And it's always nice to see something a little bit new, especially on the old patch, where new things are certainly few and far between these days. But yes, having a look at some of these kill counts, yeah, I mean, 1,000 kills for the Dwarves of Erebor is not too bad. I mean, obviously all the defenders are going to get a lot of kills. Interesting to see Dale get the most, so that skirmisher-focused approach is going to prop up your kill count just a little bit. Like I said, there's a few things that could have been done differently here. Maybe better use of the catapult. We only heard it fire once, and that was, not all that effective by the looks of things. Mirkwood allowed themselves to be cut off and were a little bit too static in the early part of the game. Maybe those two things are what I would suggest I would have done a little bit differently, but I think the attackers were worthy victors here. I mean, they pressurised when they needed to, they were a little bit more conservative when they needed to be. I think it was a fair result in the end, but still, a good back and forth there, so big thank you to DF John for sending this one in. Let's have a look and see what did the damage for him. 118 kills on Swords of Rivendell. That's not too surprising. I think when it comes to Imladrs, it was the initial slower grind is going to result in a few more kills for them actually, but when the momentum was really with them, they ended up taking a lot of damage at the hands of stuff like the Iron Watch at Mirrormere. Unfortunate for them, but it's a dirty job, but someone's got to do it. Spears of Rivendell getting a lot of kills, only 1 kill on a unit of Imladrs Sentries, that's crazy. But yeah, it was one of those where Imladrs and the Hobbits were given a pretty difficult task, but it was one of the most important ones, because like I said, I don't know how important cutting off a fair amount of the Mirkwood units in the way that they managed was, but it was something that certainly came into effect in this battle, where the initial choke point is so close to the road back to the final stand that the defenders had to take that into account. I think they did well enough, but it's one of those things where it's not the case on most maps, but it is on this one, so you've got to be a little bit more careful. So yeah, like I said, big thank you to DF John for sending this one in, a big thanks to all the players for being a part of this battle replay. As for what's coming up soon, I've got a few more replays I need to do on the old patch of Reforged, but this is going to be the last replay that I record on my old PC. I'll still be doing the rendering and uploading on my old PC. I've already got the workflow in my head, and it should work out quite nicely, I think. But I'll be doing all of the actual recording, I think, on my new PC, which should result in less mechanical problems. I still think the recent battle on the Cardland Outpost probably would have had problems with it, because many of the crashes I was experiencing in that replay were down to the actual game itself encountering an error. So yeah, that was what it was, but hopefully some of the other things which are almost certainly a result of my old PC being an old crock at this point, hopefully those will be resolved as a result of this. And it can still be useful as a rendering and uploading machine only. Yeah, so that will be something. Got a few more Reforged replays. I've got one replay that I've been given as well in Silmarillion, which will be coming out in the next few weeks as well. And one eye also on the next patch. Anything that the developers want me to show in the upcoming patch of the game will obviously get pushed to the front of the queue as and when I'm able to do so. So that's the sort of thing which I can't plan for too far in advance, because as soon as I get given it, I want to get it out the door as quickly as I possibly can. But that's the sort of thing which we'll just have to wait and see between now and the end of the year. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me, whatever is next.